How are you?
It's a bit colder than we left. Yeah.
Oh, really? It's
Well, I think if it snowed today or tomorrow.
Nice.
Because your white snow there is everywhere. They'll pull away and maybe they'll walk to it and they're like, hey, my nose is every day. That's crazy. All right. Are you guys all ready for me to begin? Shall I begin? You guys can eat. We're not going to find me to eat, please, because I know this is going to be a waiting. And I know she called people out. I didn't have to give them. I didn't have to worry about it playing. I would be okay. So I am going to. How many of you were here on Wednesday when I gave a talk about air panels? Okay, so those of you are, I'll just quickly introduce myself. Are you okay to hear me like this? Is it okay? Ready in the microphone? That's my bad. All right, I'll talk behind that. Or I can use your microphone. Yeah, that's okay. So I can, let's see. Okay, that's good? Yeah? Okay. So again, my name is Dr. Georgette Zinaty. I have the privilege of serving as the founder and CEO of an organization called Women Helping Empower Women. We are a nonprofit that function across Canada and globally. If you go to our website, you'll be able to learn and see a bit more. In addition to that, my day job is the chief of staff at a company called Myant. So Myant is a company that works in medtech and innovation. In addition to that, I've published a couple of books, done a couple of TEDx talks. I've been published in Forbes, and I sit on a number of boards that help startups, particularly women and people from our BIPOC community. So it's a little bit about me, and the reason I'm starting this way is because I want you to think about, when you're talking about your resumes, what are people going to take away from your resume? Or if they ask you a little bit to tell me a little bit about yourself, those questions sometimes that people will say is, you know, well, why are you interested in this job? Obviously, it's important to do your homework on a company, the people that may be hiring, the people who are going to be interviewing. How many of you guys have actually looked up the interviewers before you went into an interview? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So I always will say, who's going to be on the panel and who's interviewing? And if I get the names, I Google them. Right? Go on LinkedIn, see who they are, just to see if there's some alignment, or just say, oh, this was fantastic. I just saw that you did this. Congratulations. Just so that they know I've done my homework. Right? Or sometimes people ask you questions about a company. They'll say, well, tell me a little bit about what you know about our company. And if you say, well, you just help women, well, yeah, okay. But did you look at all the things that we do? So it's that kind of a little bit of detail that's a bit more important, because that says you've got some skin in the game and you're the kind of person that they want to hire. So I'm going to touch on a bunch of these things really quick, and you can always reach out to me anytime, either on LinkedIn or through our website. So career planning, really easy, right? Not so much. Sometimes what happens is, we think it's, it's really a straight line, but it isn't. It's actually goes up and it goes down. And I'm going to give you guys an exercise that I think is really worth doing if you're thinking about moving up where you want to go. So, how many times have you felt stuck? Where you are, you don't like the job, you feel like I'm not going anywhere, my life has flatlined, right? We've all been stuck at some point. So how do you get unstuck? So you have to decide whether you want to get unstuck. You're going to choose, being that way or personal growth. So personal growth is going to be a bit uncomfortable, right? Because it means you're going to be stretching yourself, maybe putting yourself out there in areas that maybe you're not so comfortable in. So just to give you an idea, I spent a couple of decades plus working at the University of Toronto. And when I did that work, I did different things at the University of Toronto, but I was aligned very much with academia. People thought, okay, I bleed blue, as they used to say. But then, once I got my doctorate, because I have an undergraduate degree, 2 masters, a certificate from Harvard, and my doctorate, my husband here said, so are we going to put this $100,000 degree on the wall, or are you going to do something with it? So it was really an opportunity, and I've been thinking about what do I want to do, how do I want to transition? And one of the things I wanted to do was get into the consultancy space. So I actually have my own business in addition to the nonprofit, doing consultancy and public speaking and all of that. But I had to develop the runway to get there. But I also had to make a conscious decision, that's what I wanted to do. So I started doing some of that work, but I also, and I do a lot of work in the DEI space because I'm part of the BIPOC community, but in addition to that, my research was actually in that space. But then I also wanted to get into innovation because I was really excited about where the world was going and the fact that there were not enough women or people of color in the innovation space. So then what did? I started putting myself out there, right? So creating that runway. So I will say to people, and this is maybe a slide you might want to take a picture of, and this is good for your own self-reflection. But it's what I call the presence audit. So on day one, I talked about your presence, how you show up, how people experience you, all of that. This will actually give you, if you take a few minutes and do it, it's even good to do with your colleagues. It's called an audit. What you want to do is think about, what are my biggest strengths? Where do people come to me? Where do they ask me questions? And then, what are my weaknesses? Where do I kind of, not so strong sometimes? And this is you sort of talking to yourself about that. What opportunities are there? Who could I tap into to help me out? And then finally is the threats. When does that presence lie? When are you minimized the most? And part of that is really to get you to do a bit of a SWOT analysis on yourself and your career so that you can think about leveling up. I mean, how many of you guys actually have done anything like this? Okay, a few of you, right? And then what have you done when you get that detail? Have you actually, no? Everybody says, what is lower? Yeah, so you can do it, but you have to then develop what is the action plan to remedy some of that, to build on the weaknesses, to leverage those strengths. So you could do the audit, but then you got to develop the plan, right? And you keep hearing me talking about the plan. So purpose, we often talk about finding your purpose. If any of you ever listen to Oprah or watch her, she always talks about purpose. Sometimes it's harder to figure out what it is. Some of us are lucky to find it. Sometimes it takes us a really long time. One of my aha moments and my kind of purpose was when I was still working at the university, and I created a Women in Leadership program. And it was part of really sort of testing out some of the research I was doing. So I built this program. And what ended up happening was I actually got some professors from the Department of Psychology saying, who built this? And I went, me. And they said, did you have anybody helping you to build this? I said, no. I kind of built it thinking, if I was a girl their age, what would I want someone to tell me? And they said, you built it perfectly. From a psychology and learning development perspective, it was, okay, my instincts were right. But the best part of that program was when we were finished. And I spread it out over 6 months. And then I got the feedback. I remember, we had people sort of do different sessions, and I had it once a month, and we had journaling and all these things that I built into it. And I remember getting the feedback forms, and I was sitting in the parking lot. It was 10 o'clock at night at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus, ready to get that car going. I opened the folder, just I'm thinking, God, I hope they liked it. I hope they liked it. And it was comments like, Georgette changed my life. She made me realize I have the right to be at the table. I mean, I was crying in the car. And I remember I still get goosebumps talking about it, because I remember thinking, oh my God, I think I found my thing. This is my thing. This is the space I need to be in. Because the way I felt reading those comments told me that that's where I needed to be. You could give me $1 million and it would make me about as happy as it was, knowing that those girls had changed their thinking about who they thought about themselves and their future self. So when you think about your leadership journey, there's going to be peaks and valleys, and there's going to be some choice moments. So I want to show you this little tool that I also use that I encourage you to take some time to think about. Okay? It looks like this. So this is an example, but I want you, again, you can take a picture of this if you wish. I want you to think and map out your career. If you think about, here's I am, I graduated, maybe I had a really great manager or a mentor, and then all blank hit the fan and I had to shift careers, or maybe my career flatlined. Once you do this, it will actually help you figure out what your career path looks like. Now, it's also very interesting when you do this, and this is the reason I love using this tool when I coach people, is the following. When sometimes those really low moments, people are like, I'm in a terrible place, I hate my job, I don't like where I am, I'm feeling really stuck. Guess what happens? It goes right back up again. Right? That valley is not a valley, it's just a valley for now. And if you're powerful enough to work with the right people, you can turn that around and create new opportunities for yourself. But you have to recognize it, right? So when you map it out, I guarantee you, sometimes things happen and you think, oh God, this is the worst thing ever. Do you know what he always used to say to me? It's a blessing. I'd say, but he said, it's a blessing. It's the will of God, so whatever you want to believe in, telling you to move in a different direction, and he's been absolutely right. So, again, just some questions for you to think about for yourself in terms of what are those choice moments when you think about, what risks did you take? So I will often talk about risks. Why? Because if you want to really level up, get the next job, move your career, think about what kinds of calculated risks you're taking. And I don't mean risks like I'm going to quit my job, I have nothing to fall back on. No, don't do that. But what I'm saying is think about how you're going to put yourself out there, who you're going to connect with, and the kinds of things. And yesterday, the day before, I talked a lot about LinkedIn, and I also talked about the first impressions, right? How do you show up? Now, the reason that's also important is if you're showing up for an interview, it is important to think about all of these things, right? Because sometimes, how many times have you met somebody and you think, yeah, they were okay, but I don't know, there's just something about them I didn't like, right? And guess what? So that's bias, by the way, at play, right? But we don't necessarily recognize it. So when I sat at tables and someone said to me, I'm not sure, there was something about her I didn't like, I'd say, what exactly was it? Let's go through the questions again. I'd like to compare this A, B, and C candidate and see how they responded. I've actually pushed back. When I was at university, I pushed back to vice presidents of university and said, because what I heard was the right answer. So what was it about that person you didn't like? And I rubbed them the wrong way, and I actually don't really care. Because at the end of the day, we have to get the right candidate, right? And I could see bias. Now, why is likability important? Because if you actually like someone, you're going to be a little bit more, you're going to lean towards them. So that doesn't mean you're super bubbly and friendly. It just means you have to be your authentic self. And part of that is just making sure that you're going with the right mindset, because that's when you're going to shine. Otherwise, you're going to talk yourself out of the job. Credibility is the second piece of it, which is, do you know your stuff? And I bet you anybody who's applying, you probably know yourself more than you think. But we kind of do the negative self-talk. You know, your power, how you're holding the room, being able to talk, tone, all of that, and again, appearance. We just say, make sure that you are, taking the time to look like you didn't just get out of bed. So confidence is important, and confidence actually comes through as a result of those things when you're doing it. And when you are being interviewed, I talked a couple of days ago about you not minimizing the ums and the ahs. Part of doing the confidence piece, it's actually taking that out. It's being able to say yes. It's a great question, or pausing, and then speaking. Now don't pause for too long because that means you're not sure, right? So it's just enough of a pause to say, I'm thinking about that, great question, and then you get into the answer. I'm not going to play this, unfortunately, because of time constraints, but I really appreciate you to listen to this. Have you listened to it? Yes. So it's about 15 minutes. It's the second most watched TED Talk. What's interesting about her, I will tell you, is that I don't know if anybody who's watched this, if you know this, but so she's a Harvard professor. She talks about presence, executive presence, and power posing, right? So they did this test where people were asked, being interviewed, and those who did the power pose for 2 minutes in the bathroom before they did the interviews, and people who didn't. Now the people testing them didn't know what was happening. They just interviewed people. So those who did the power posing actually outperformed those who didn't. So it was our psychology that changed, right? So, but what's interesting about that is her and her female colleague did this. They became like very, very famous, obviously, because of all the work that was imagined. Second most watched TED Talks, like 60 million views. Then people started saying it's not real. Their data wasn't right. She had to redo that entire study to reprove what she just said. I'm smiling. So imagine if, the reason I say that, you're smiling, thinking, would they ever say to a man, we don't know that you actually did that study correctly? And then her friend, who was doing it with her, actually second-guessed herself and then kind of was like, well, maybe we didn't do it accurately. Okay, I know. So this is why I have women helping empower women. I see your face. I know. So this is exactly why I talk about women needing to help other women, because we say we don't always do it. So when you're doing an interview, watch your fidgeting. Sometimes women will do this with their hair, or we'll play with our rings, or whatever it is. Again, it shows that you're uncomfortable. Watch that. I've seen men do the jimmy, what I call the jimmy leg. The leg keeps moving. It just tells people you're nervous. Don't do it. You're all laughing because you see it, right? Yeah. Right. And I talked a little bit about communication skills, the ums and the ahs, but just to remember, just to recap on some stuff I said, it's important to say things like I recommend, not I think. Because usually if someone says, well, give us a situation when, or what would you do in a situation like in a job interview? And you may say, well, I think what we could do, you say, well, I would recommend this if I was your chief of staff, right? Or, we don't say, I'm no expert. No one's an expert, as I've said before. And I talked a little bit about body language, so even if you're in an interview, or you're preparing for an interview, or you're coming to speak to somebody at a table outside, make sure body language is strong. And I say this because look at how sometimes people sit when you're waiting for that call. How many of you are sitting like this, owning the space, or we're often like this, or on our phones, or doing whatever it is that we're doing. And as I mentioned the other day too, our facial expressions, I did the test. You guys remember my test that I did, the hello, I'm so happy to be here? Yes, right? Were you here on Monday, Wednesday? was here. So you guys remember, right? So take that away. You know, to say, I'm so happy to be here. The hands, the smiling, the body language, all of that is how people are experiencing you in an interview. If you're sitting going, yeah, this is good, yeah, really, I'm so excited, versus I'm really excited to be here, right? That's what they're feeling. Now, I talked a little bit about growth mindset and fixed mindsets. Growth mindsets, we're thinking that any hurdle, it's okay, I can fix it. I can overcome it. This is maybe telling me something different. Fixed mindsets, it's the world is coming to an end, right? It's like, no, we cannot do it this way. This is the only way that it can be done. And you're going to find different kinds of people in the world, but actually children that they tested early on that have growth mindsets are very, very successful people in your life as they get older, for that reason. So we don't think of a problem as a problem. We think of it as, okay, we're going to pause and pivot. We're going to think of a new idea. Maybe I'm going to ask other people an opinion on this because I'm not really sure. So rather than thinking that something has gone south and that's it, we can't fix it, and oh my God, that's a different kind of mindset, right? And also we talk a little bit about, you know, when we look at, you know, challenges or setbacks, or even the success of others, like, oh, why did he get that promotion over me? That should have been me. No, you could say that, and maybe say, maybe it's not my time, but maybe there's something bigger and better waiting for me. Growth mindset, fixed mindset. And we touched on brand and why it's important. And I think some of you now realize you all have a brand in terms of how you show up. You know, I was really happy to talk to so many of you after the session on Wednesday, that you're thinking about that a little bit. And, you know, we'll talk about all of these things as part of your brand story and what it really means in terms of who you are. We don't always think about it like that. We think about, well, you know, I'm just out here, this is what I do, but you're more than what you do. There's so much to your story, there's so much richness in your experience. And so, you know, it's the relationships, and it's actually building trust at the end of the day. Like when I think about, you know, I say to people, well, what is, you know, your brand? They'll say, well, I'm so X, Y, and Z. But part of what your brand story is, that you're reliable, that you're trustworthy, that you're good at what you do, that your word means something. To me, that's how I see my brand, right? And so as you develop that, it's going to be important. Part of what emphasizes your brand is your digital footprint. So when I say to people, are you on LinkedIn? I shared this a couple of days ago. I'm sharing it again because I think it's so important for you to think about what you put out there. And I'm so happy to hear the number of people who were here on Wednesday that have now updated their LinkedIn. It's fantastic, right? So it's important to think about what you want to say, not just in terms of what you do for work, what you do outside of work, areas of interest. It should be forward-facing. It should not be back-facing. And what I mean by that is, where do you want your career to go? You know, interest in innovation, whatever it may be. You might say that. You can say that, you know, innovation, you know, thought leader, or innovation, you know, advisor, or it could just be innovation learner. It doesn't matter. It's telling people this is the space I want to play. When you're thinking about resumes, some strong words to use in your resumes that we don't always do. You know, we always say, you know, worked as, supported, assisted. Okay, that's really good, but that makes you look like you're down here, right? I bet you if I asked how many of you guys motivated your team to get stuff done, you'd say, yeah, I've done that, right? Or, you know, did all of these other things, spearheaded. How many of you actually led something? But rather than saying led, I just spearheaded, right? Sounds so much better, doesn't it? Much more powerful. So I just want you to think about the words, even like piloted. If you tried something, whether it was successful or not, you still put out a brand new idea. So own it. And then the other thing I say to people is add some data points. So for example, you know, if you increase sales by a certain percentage, what was it, right? Or if you had an event and the next event. So sometimes people say to me, yeah, but we had like, you know, 15 and the next year we had 25. Okay, do the percentages increase. That sounds way better, right? So, you know, that's more than whatever it is, right? If you double the numbers, it's 100% increase in the numbers, right? So you don't need to put 15 and 30. Just go ahead and increase the attendance by 100%. It's still true, but it sounds way more powerful, right? So just think about that. And again, whatever you can add the impact numbers in your resume and those things. The other thing I learned once from my headhunter, which I always thought was a really great idea, is when I was at the University of Toronto, of course, the applications were always for jobs internally. But once you go external, we assume people know what that company is and what it does. They don't. So a headhunter said to me, what you need to do is put 2 or 3 sentences, very high level, and a little bit about the company. So like when I was at the University of Toronto Scarborough, for example, we were between 15 and 17,000 students. So we considered ourselves a mid-sized comprehensive university, even though we were a campus. right? So I would say, the executive director at University of Toronto Scarborough, 15 to 20,000 students, mid-sized comprehensive university. This is our goal for fundraising. This is the size of our budget, and this is the role that I have. 3 lines. And then I put in my duties. So all that did was give someone who did not know the context of how complicated that environment actually was and how senior my role was. Because you could be executive director, you could be a director, but a director in banking is much different than a director somewhere else, right? So context. When we look for jobs, it sometimes looks like this, right? How many of us are looking for jobs that looks like this? You don't know where to begin? So what I'm going to say is start with something like this, the network tree. How many of you ever used a tool like this before? Okay, good. So the idea is that's you, and then I say to people, think about 2 or 3 people that you know, that you can kind of tap on, and then maybe they have a friend, and then they have a friend, and somewhere between there's an employer. That's one other way to network that we don't think about. Right? You say, hey, I'm thinking about moving into the innovation space. So, I told you guys I shifted careers after I left the university. I did that by calling a friend of mine. I said, do you know anybody who works in consulting? He said, yeah, there's a woman on the board of my church. I said, okay, do you think I could have a coffee? Coffee in January, had a coffee, it's supposed to be 30 minutes, 2 hours later. She was saying, well, how can I help you? And I said, well, I think I can actually help you. I've looked at your website and I think you're actually missing a really critical part of the future of leadership, which was DEI. This was 2020, right? Pre-George Floyd and everything. So she said, okay, why don't you come on as a consultant? If we sell anything, we'll pay you. I was like, okay. So I created a program well before anything happened on May 25th, 2020. And guess what happened? The world was looking for something by June and July, and very few people in Canada actually had anything, except us. So we became one of the top consulting companies in Canada that were actually able to provide DEI training. So I mentioned this the other day, and I'm going to tell you again. So this is something I think you need to really think about. I went fast, but I'm going to get you to really think about this, please, if this is one takeaway. I want you to think about how you're building your network, because this is going to help you find work. So if you take 5 to 10 people and you write them down, 5 to 10 people that you think you can, tap on the shoulder and say, in my own business, who can you help me with? Can you make an introduction? That's your top pile. The middle pile is, if any of you went to university, college, here or abroad, it doesn't matter. Contact those alumni offices and say, hey, I'm looking for whatever, I'd like to volunteer. Is there a panel that you need somebody on? Yesterday we were sitting next to a gentleman, and I said to him, he said, well, my wife's an engineer. I said, did she go to school here? He said, yeah. I said, is she involved in an alumni office? He said, no. I went, okay, you have a woman, engineer, Canadian educated, a woman of color. Are you kidding? Do you know how many students would look up to someone, they would say, that's someone like me, this is where I want to go to school? I said, you need to let her university know what she's doing. She has a great job, but she probably doesn't even know where to begin. And this is what we want to be able to do. The strategic piece is find people outside of your network. So if you're in education, if you're in marketing, if you're in engineering, find 3 to 5 people outside of that are more highly placed than you, that you can now, tap on their shoulder and say, I'm thinking of making a career shift, what do you think? And I've done this, because those are the people that are my friends, but not really my friends. And what I mean by that is, they're not the ones saying to me, because I'll tell you this, your friends, you say, I want to apply for this job, and you know what they'll say? Oh, you're going to be great, of course you can totally do it. That's what friends are for, right? Now, these people are not saying that to me. They're saying, is this going to limit your career? What is next for you after this? Are you going to thrive? Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? They're making me think about the important questions. That's the strategic group. So those are people that will mentor you in a slightly different way. And we talked about the introduction. I introduced myself earlier. I did that so that you could see what that looks like. We talked about this on Wednesday, but I want you to really hone this in, because part of that is going to be so important. So, you're not just an analyst, you're not just a customer service rep. I was talking to somebody earlier before this session, and I said to her, I said, people often will say, well, I work in customer service. And I'm like, no, you represent a really big brand. Like, you're the front-facing person. You're the person that decides if someone's going to continue to work with a company or not. Because you're the customer service, you're the front lines. You're the most important, actually, in many ways. You have crappy customer service, no one's going to do business with you, right? So let's not undermine that. Even if you're a waitress or a waiter, it's the same thing. That experience will determine whether I come back to that restaurant. I don't care how good the food is. You get crappy service, are you going to come back? No. Exactly. Why networking is important. So very things to remember, never leave home without your business cards, whether it's digital or in your pocket. There's always room to network no matter what. It's important to always follow up, as I say. I think it's absolutely critical. It's important to think about the fact that you have a resume and have it ready. You can send it to people. Yesterday we talked about cover letters. Some companies don't have cover letters. You know, I read them. The person that was sat next to me at the table had the same reaction, which is, if you find a typo or they have a letter but it's actually to the wrong person and you know they're sending out multiples, but if they can make that one mistake, then I'm not sure you're the right candidate for me. So that will often, for me, go right into the recycling bin. If you can't, that's because the detail's important, right? So if you don't know who you're applying for, so double check it. Slow it down, do it right, and double check it. And as I talk about the runway, it's important to think about where you want to go. So we always say we want to be here. If you have not developed what the work batch schedule looks like to get you there, you're not going to get there. So that means if I want to be in a certain place in 18 months or 2 years, what is that going to look like? Who do I need to meet? What introductions do I need to make? Where do I need to volunteer? If I want to pivot my career, try something new, that's the only way you're going to do it, I promise you. Otherwise, there are great ideas in your head that won't get you far. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much. Feel free to reach out, connect, call me. Thank you. Anybody has questions? That was literally a microphone. Thank you guys so very much. I have to head out, but I will hopefully see all of you on LinkedIn. Feel free to add me, connect with me, and let me know how you're doing on Friday. Thank you.
All right, once again, thank you so much, Dr. Georgette Zinaty. She will not be able to stay longer because she has a flight to catch. So, once again, thank you so much, Dr. Georgette Zinaty, for your insightful session on resume building and career transitions. All right, and of course, this time, ladies and gentlemen, we will take a quick break. You can have your lunch outside. We will be back shortly. Thank you.